All right, let's go ahead and implement this bonus Rendux thing. So I'm going to pull in the exercise version. We'll run the tests, and we'll get our first error. So we're not rendering the switch component. Let's go ahead and start implementing some of this stuff, because we've got a fair amount to do here. So I actually provided as much as I could that was Redux specific, because I don't think that you really care to learn Redux in this workshop. Feel free to learn that elsewhere. So yeah, some of the Redux stuff I provided for you, and we'll just be doing some of the pattern stuff. So if we look at the usage of the Rendux component, it's taking the initial state, it's taking the reducer, and then I kind of covered this already, but it is taking this function as a child, or this render prop. So that's where we're going to start, is our render prop. Actually, before that, we need the context, so let's do that first. So we'll make our Rendux context equal context equals react.create context. And we'll initialize this with all of the stuff that our usage example is using. So we've got rendux.state and rendux.dispatch, and down here we have, actually it's using the render prop version with the reset. So we're going to need those three things in our default. So we'll say state is just an empty object, reset is a function that does nothing, and dispatch likewise. Great, so next let's go ahead and implement the provider pattern. So we'll return a toggle, or the Rendux context dot provider. And because we're using both the provider pattern and the render props, we're going to pull out our UI. Here, actually, let's just make this a little easier to read. We'll do children equals this.props. And then we'll get our UI from type of children, this function. Then we'll call the children with hey children. Otherwise, we'll just do the children. OK, great. And then we'll render the UI. And let us not forget, the provider also needs a value, this dot state. That's an inside joke. All right, so we're rendering the provider. We're also handling the render prop. That's great. We need to also expose the consumer so that people can use rendux.consumer. Technically, they could use rendux context.consumer. That would be totally fine if you wanted to do it that way. It would work fine. But I actually like making that explicit, and this is the only way that you can access the context as a static property off of my component. So I'll say static consumer equals rendux.context.consumer. And let's save that and see what we broke. All right, so, well, this is a familiar error. OK, so we don't actually, or we haven't yet implemented anything on our state. We haven't initialized our state at all. So let's go ahead and do that. State, this first thing is it's saying, hey, can't read reset. So let's make sure we have reset on there. Reset, this dot reset. And again, it's kind of weird to put like callback handlers in your state because they're not things that change ever. But in the case of context, it's the easiest way to expose these things to context without worrying about unnecessary re-renders. So that's what we're doing here, is adding that to our state. We're also going to want to add the dispatch method to this dot store dot dispatch. And then we'll have our state, the state within the state is going to be this dot initial rendux state. OK, cool. So so far so good. One thing that we need to do is implement this higher order component. So that's what's failing, is it can't find the printed state, which is being rendered here. So let's go ahead and implement our higher order component. So we had the wrapper equals react.create or forward ref. That's going to take props and the ref that we should forward, and we'll return the component here. We're going to return Rendux consumer And this will, inside, use the render prop that the consumer is exposing. That'll take the Rendux thing, the Rendux utils, whatever you want to call that, and render the component. And here we'll forward on all the props. We'll forward on the ref. And we'll forward on Rendux. Whoops, Rendux. And then we'll return the wrapper instead. OK, cool. We're passing tests. We could improve this, so we're not doing the hoist non-react static. So let's just go ahead and do that really quick so we don't bump into problems in the future. Wrapper component. And then let's also give us a nice display name for DevTools. Display name equals with Rendux. And then we'll use the component, whoops, display name or component name. All right, let's actually, I didn't get a chance to show you what this display name looks like in DevTools, so let's look at that really quick. That's in our thing here. Go into our React DevTools, and it's saying unknown. I don't know why it's saying unknown. It should be saying the display name. What? Boo. Well, by golly. Oh, you know what? Maybe. I'm not sure what that is. Maybe what if we do this?
It's not because it's a const, is it? You can.
No, you can reassign properties on const. I don't know. That's weird. Somebody find out what that is and send a pull request to the front end masters recording. But yeah, so that's the whole thing. So hopefully, at least this last thing gave you a peek into the fact that these patterns aren't just useful for a toggle component that's managing one thing of state, but they're actually useful for managing an entire application worth of state. In particular, provider pattern for solving our prop drilling problem, and thank heaven to React Context API for making that really easy to do. And then also the render props for giving total control over the UI, state reducers and control props for giving control over the state. And combining these things together, you can make some really highly flexible APIs for people to consume in any way that their use case needs. The really nice thing about these patterns is that they're pretty low-level primitive patterns that you can build on top of to make components that make even more opinions. So I've actually been waiting for somebody to re-implement some other autocomplete solutions with downshift, because the other autocomplete solutions are easier to just get up and started with. You just like, here's autocomplete items equals this dot props dot items, and it's really easy. Even if it's not as flexible, it's a lot easier. But I think the reason that people haven't done that is because it's pretty generic or like case-by-case basis. But the nice thing is that you can build on top of these things to provide cleaner, nicer APIs for specific use cases. And also with higher order components, being able to build on top of these render prop APIs makes it a lot easier too. So I'm really excited about these patterns. Thank you so much for looking at my Twitter. So thank you so much for coming out to the workshop. And with that, I'll just say goodbye. And please go ahead and submit feedback. I'd appreciate that. Thank you.